Hey everyone, David Nagel here. Happy holidays. This is a toxic member of our company. You might think to yourself, well, why do you keep a toxic member of your company around? Brandon Tuss, who is my director of podcasting, came across this fellow a number of years ago, and we decided that as much as we really dislike Mr. Jingles here, and we call him Jingles because he jingles, is to remind us of who we don't want to be and who we do want to be. Nobody here at Life Is Now actually likes Jingles, pretty much detest him, and he only comes out around the holidays. The rest of the year he usually hides somewhere. But on occasion, we will see him pop up in somebody's office, and when you see him, it's usually not going to be a good day. Unless you're going to practice the idea of how to deal with dysfunction and toxicity. That is the topic of our talk today. Let's go.
All right.
22 years I've been in business, and every holiday season I get the same question. How do we deal with toxic family members? We go into a situation that we know may have some tense topics. As the holiday starts to approach, we can feel the tension building inside of ourselves. How do we deal with a situation where we have people possibly dysfunctional to the point where we know it's going to be an issue? And I'm going to give you some strategies today that will help you navigate this for the rest of your life. So first of all, let's separate two things. There's a difference between toxic and dysfunctional. Every family is dysfunctional to some degree. We also have the idea that we deal with the past differently. One of the things that is fundamentally true is that as time goes on, our memory of the past does not stay the same. Very often you'll have two people will experience something at the same time, but have very different memories of what actually happened. And then of course, based on whatever story we're telling ourselves about the experience, over a period of time, those memories can change significantly. In a family that's mildly dysfunctional, this could possibly cause an argument or some hurt feelings or some ruffled feathers, so to speak, but usually does not get out of control too bad. So how do we deal with it with dysfunction first? We can pre-think how we're going to handle something that we know might be a touchy subject before we actually get there. Have a very clear concept of how we want the day to go. We want to have fun. We want to exchange love. We want to exchange friendship. We want to get together in a celebratory type of an attitude. So what I can do about that for me as the person that's actually pre-thinking this before I get into the situation is think about how I want to show up. What are my strengths and weaknesses? Maybe I get triggered easy. Maybe my feelings get hurt easy. Maybe sometimes I have a need to be right, or I will resist something if I feel that it's a bit of a touchy situation. Knowing how I react and respond is a very good thing because I can pre-decide how I want to respond before I get there. Meaning this, if I know that there's a touchy subject, that there's a very good chance that it's going to arise, I can think to myself, if this topic comes to the forefront of the discussion and it's uncomfortable for me, how do I want to respond to it? One of the tools is this. Understand it's okay to agree to disagree. If a touchy subject comes to the surface, is this the place for me to have a need to be right? Do I have to make a point and have it stick? Do I need to convince other people of the way that I think? Well, it's very possible that that might be necessary at some time, but it's not necessary for the celebration of the holiday. I don't need to change a person's opinion. I don't need to change their idea. I don't have to have my own way or have to be right in this situation. So if something comes up that's uncomfortable, probably the best idea is how can we move on to another subject that's much more fun to talk about and in harmony with the goal of having a great celebration and love and enjoying family at this time and not being stuck in this situation where it's raw. We can do this quite easily by actually suggesting to talk about it at another time. Here's one of the ways that I've dealt with this in the past. I would say, this is a really good subject and we should talk about that. I would love to give the appropriate amount of time and attention to this topic. Can we set up a future time to discuss this so that we can actually give it the attention it deserves? Now, what's really great about this is that we're giving the person the attention and the validation about the topic that they're actually talking about. One of the things that's important for just about every person is to be seen, validated, and heard. And many times that's more important than the topic itself or being right about the topic itself. What is my tool that I'm going to access? Looking the person in the eye, talking with a compassionate tone, and letting them know that this is an important topic, they're going to feel seen, validated, and heard. Letting them know that it's important enough for you to actually think about scheduling it at a different time when not all the family is around and we can give it the proper attention that it deserves. If a family is just mildly dysfunctional, usually this is enough to get off of the topic, to focus on great things, and to stay away from something that might be too sensitive or inappropriate for the moment. What do we do if we get pushback on the idea? This is the place where we get into a skill set called boundary setting. Not only does it keep a person safe, but it also keeps you in control in the direction of the topic itself and the process of this conversation. So here's what we need to know about boundary setting first and foremost. You can't set a boundary with any person if you're not willing to walk away from the relationship if they don't respect the boundary. Saying, this is not appropriate to talk right now. I'm not going to have this discussion right now, but I would very much like to talk to you about this at a later time. If the person pushes back on that, your only option at that point really is to get up and to walk away, to go into another room to get some space. It's also possible that you could ask the individual if they would be willing to say, can we step outside for a few minutes and have this conversation in private? In which, if the person agrees to that, you're not going to have the conversation, but you're going to reset the boundary. It is not okay for me to have this conversation around the family. The intention is that we're celebrating family, we're celebrating a holiday. So I do want to address this with you, but I do not want to address this with you right here and now. So I am asking that we set a time to do this when we can be together and we don't have to expose the rest of the family to this idea. Generally, that is enough in that instance to get a reasonable person to say, you know what, okay, I'll do that. They may not be happy about it, but you don't need them to be happy about it. You just need them to go along with the value add of, let's not do this right now. This is a holiday. However, what do we do if a person is going to insist that this happens right now? You have to be willing to leave. One of the problems that a person has is they're like, look, this is my family too. I really want to be here. I want to have this celebration. Why should I have to leave if this person is going to insist on having this conversation and I don't want to have it? Why don't they leave? And the answer is because they're being unreasonable to begin with. We need to understand this, and I don't think that when you are at the party or at the celebration, that is the time to start thinking about, am I willing to leave over this? Am I not willing to leave over this? Am I willing to have this conversation, not have this conversation? This needs to be pre-framed in your thinking before you ever go. What do we do when we get a person that's toxic? Here in our office, we have a toxic person. It's Mr. Jingles. And when we run across a toxic person like Mr. Jingles, one of the things that we generally want to do is get rid of Mr. Jingles. But we can't do that because that would be considered toxic behavior. So what is it that we do when we run across a toxic person? A toxic person, you're dealing with something else. You might be dealing with some mental illness. You might be dealing with severe lack of emotional maturity. And let's face it, this is a party, this is a social gathering. You may be dealing with some added substances like alcohol that could be mixed into the situation. What it means is that it's not a stable individual. And when you're dealing with a person that's not stable, first and foremost, you have to understand and you have to accept from a place of personal responsibility what you're actually looking at here. You're looking at some sort of mental dysfunction. When we're dealing with that, number one, we want to make sure that everybody is safe. Because if it's a toxic person, you never know how far they're willing to go, especially if alcohol is involved. Number two, my option is not to stay and try to convince this person of anything, but it's to leave. It's to literally walk away. This is probably not somebody that you can set a boundary with, and one of the reasons for this is because they don't generally have the same value system that you do. If I understand that, then I should also understand my normal way of dealing with dysfunction. That's not going to happen. The idea is that I will leave. I will peacefully bow out of the situation, and I will leave and have a conversation possibly with the host or whoever it is that's throwing the party at a later time. Because a toxic person generally doesn't have the ability to have emotional maturity in the situation. You also have to constantly remember the idea that you can't set a boundary with someone that is not going to respect it or doesn't have the ability to respect it. If you try to then back down and reiterate the idea to try to push it to get your way, to try to convince somebody to think along the lines that you're thinking, you're now moving into a dysfunctional thought process, and that's not good. But I want to just end this with saying something here that's pretty important. If you know ahead of time you're going into a situation with a toxic person, the best thing to do would be to really consider whether or not you want to keep putting yourself in a situation of having to deal with a toxic person. So maybe you want to ask yourself, why would I want to put myself in this situation over and over? It's just an added thought for you to think about moving forward so that you can make sure that the holidays that you celebrate and the celebrations that you have with family and friends, so that they reach the intent that they originally had, which is peace, love, and celebration. Have a peaceful and a safe and a wonderful, loving holiday. I really hope that you enjoyed our talk for today. It is one of the most popular topics that show up around the holiday season. If you enjoy it, if you like what it is that we're giving you folks, please subscribe. We would love to have you on our subscription list so that we can communicate on a regular basis. Godspeed to everybody. Have an amazing holiday. We love you. Take care.